Have you ever been reading the Bible, maybe a part you thought you knew inside out, and then some phrase just, I don't know, just hits you weird, like it doesn't quite fit the picture you have in your head?
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
Yeah, like there's this missing piece, some deeper story about the spiritual world hidden just under the surface of what we usually talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like maybe centuries of tradition, all well-meaning, I'm sure, might have sort of filtered out some really ancient kind of mind-bending truths about God and us and the whole unseen realm.
Yeah, filtered is a good word for it.
Okay, let's unpack this and see what we find.
What's fascinating here is how our modern sort of Western viewpoint often gets in the way of understanding the Bible's original ancient worldview. It's just different.
We come at it with different assumptions.
Totally different assumptions than the people who first wrote it, first read it. And for this deep dive, we've really been digging into these incredible insights from Dr. Michael Heiser's Invisible World documentary.
Right, the one Davi and Jorge Hill were discussing.
Exactly. Davi and Jorge Hill, he's a theologian, apologist, and was actually a personal friend of Dr. Heiser. And their conversation, it really pushes you to look past those filters we mentioned.
To find those layers of meaning that maybe we've just glossed over for too long.
Yeah, overlooked, or maybe just didn't have the framework for.
Well, I hope you listening are ready too, because this is going to stretch your thinking. Our mission today, we're taking a journey, a real deep dive into ancient biblical cosmology.
It's a wild ride.
We'll look at passages that might have seemed weird or confusing before, maybe re-examine ones we thought we knew. But all through this supernatural worldview, the original writers actually had. And I'm pretty sure that after this, you really won't read your Bible the same way again. It's like a shortcut to being well-informed on something genuinely mind-blowing.
It really reconfigures things.
So, just for clarity, our source material is coming from excerpts of Jesus mostró la verdad sobre demonios. That's from the YouTube channel Lo de Davi Testimonios, featuring Davi and the very insightful Jorge Hill.
Great stuff in there.
The divine council, God's family in the invisible realm.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this ancient worldview, we kind of have to tackle something that honestly feels pretty uncomfortable for a lot of us raised in, strict monotheism.
Yeah, this is a big one.
The idea of God's plural in the Bible, it feels wrong, doesn't it? Like it clashes with the whole one true God thing.
It definitely challenges our categories.
But then you bump into verses that just make you pause.
Yeah.
Like Psalm 82. Right at the start, it says, God stands in the divine assembly. He renders judgment in the midst of the gods.
Boom, right there.
Right. And you think, wait, what? How can the Bible talk about other gods if there's only one God? It makes us squirm because we automatically connect the word God with like a unique set of supreme attributes, omnipotence, omniscience, all that.
And that discomfort, it's understandable from where we sit now, but it kind of misses the nuance in the original Hebrew. The absolute key here, and this is something Jorge Hill and Dr. Heiser really stress, is the word Elohim.
Elohim.
It's a plural word. But here's the thing. It's simply a word that describes a supernatural being. It doesn't automatically load it with all the unique attributes we reserve for Yahweh, the God of Israel. It's more like a job title or a species description, almost.
So like spirit being or something.
Exactly. It's a category descriptor. Think about it if you use a powerful Bible tool like Logos Bible Software, which Jorge Hill mentions they did, and you look at Psalm 82, verse 1, and then verse 6.
Yeah.
You see the exact same Hebrew word, Elohim, used for Yahweh, our capital G God, the one presiding, and then for these other gods, lowercase g, that he's judging in the assembly.
The same word for both.
The exact same word. It's a huge linguistic clue. It tells us the biblical writers weren't squeamish about using the same term for different kinds of spiritual entities. They understood there was a whole realm of these beings.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. It's not saying there are multiple supreme beings. It's just a word for a type of being.
Precisely.
So when the Ten Commandments say, "You shall have no other gods before me," the ancient Israelites weren't just thinking about statues made of wood and stone.
Not just statues, no. They understood the statues represented something real. And this is the point Jorge Hill makes with that great anecdote about his friend asking Dr. Heiser, if I went back in time and asked Moses if these other lowercase gods were real, what would he say?
Yeah, what was the answer?
Mike Heiser apparently said no. Moses wouldn't say yes. Moses would say, what a strange question. Because for them, it was just obvious. Everybody knew they were real. They lived in a world populated by spiritual forces.
That really does flip our modern understanding on its head. We tend to think monotheism means denying the existence of anything else called God.
Right. We've kind of flattened the spiritual landscape in our minds. This ancient worldview opens it back up. It's much more dynamic, more populated, and frankly more contested than we usually imagine. These weren't just myths. They were seen as actual spiritual competitors.
Okay, I think I'm tracking. So other Elohim exist. They're real spiritual beings. But the crucial question then becomes, what makes Yahweh, our God, different? What's his unique status among all these Elohim?
And here's where it gets really interesting, because while Elohim is this broader category, Yahweh, the God of Israel, is absolutely unequivocally unique within that category. The Bible hammers this home again and again.
How so?
It insists no other Elohim is like him. Yahweh is the creator of all things, including all other Elohim. He's sovereign. He's perfect. He's the ultimate reality. He didn't emerge from some pre-existing divine soup. He made the soup.
So he's the uncreated creator of all other spiritual beings.
Exactly. So it's not polytheism, not even close. It's a complex spiritual hierarchy with Yahweh at the absolute pinnacle. He created all these other beings we also call Elohim simply because they belong to that non-material spiritual realm. He's the God of gods, the supreme sovereign.
Okay, that clarifies things a lot. So if God is supreme, totally sovereign, doesn't need anyone, why create these other Elohim? What's their purpose? What do they actually do?
Right. And this leads us straight into the idea of God's governance, his administration, and the celestial assembly, what often called the divine council.
The divine council, like in Psalm 82, where God is standing in the assembly.
Exactly. And Psalm 89 also mentions God being greatly feared in the council of the holy ones. This isn't just pretty poetry, it's describing a reality. These beings, these Elohim, they actually participate somehow in God's governance of the cosmos.
He lets them participate, like a cabinet or advisors.
Kind of, not because he needs their advice, he's omniscient, but because he chooses to delegate, to allow his created beings to participate in his rule. It's a pattern we see with humans too, being given dominion. It's a fascinating glimpse into how the spiritual realm might actually function.
And do we ever actually see this council in action, like making decisions?
We do. There's this really strange story, one that often gets skipped over in 1 Kings 22. The prophet Micaiah is talking to King Ahab, the wicked king of Israel.
Oh yeah, Micaiah. He always told Ahab bad news.
Right. So Micaiah describes this vision he had. He says, verse 19, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. That's the council.
The whole host of heaven, okay.
Then the Lord asked the council, who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? Basically, who's going to lure Ahab to his death?
Wow, God asks him.
Yeah, and they discuss it. Different suggestions are made. Then, verse 21, a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. God asks how. The spirit says, I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets.
A lying spirit. Volunteering for the job.
Volunteering. And the Lord says, you are to entice him and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. He gives permission.
Wow. I've definitely read that passage, but I guess I never really paid attention to what was happening there in the spiritual realm. That's active planning, interaction, spiritual beings involved in deciding earthly events under God's authority.
Exactly. It shatters that image of a static, distant heaven. It's dynamic. It's active. There's a spiritual government at work.
So the council members are Elohim.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the term is broader. What other kinds of beings get called Elohim in the Bible?
Yeah, it gets used surprisingly broadly when you look at the Hebrew. For instance, those gods of the nations we talked about. Astarte, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Moloch, the Ammonite god they sacrificed children to.
Terrible idols.
Yes. But the text, in places like 1 Kings 11, refers to them using the term Elohim. The Bible isn't saying they're equal to Yahweh, obviously, but it acknowledges them as real, powerful, spiritual entities that people worship, not just statues.
Real spiritual forces behind the idols.
Correct. And get this, it's even used for the disembodied spirit of a dead human. Remember the Witch of Endor story in 1 Samuel 28?
Where Saul asks her to bring up Samuel? Yeah, creepy story.
Well, when the witch sees Samuel's spirit rising, the Hebrew says she saw an Elohim coming up out of the earth. Verse 13.
Samuel's ghost is called an Elohim?
Yes. Because he's a spiritual, non-material being appearing. It shows just how much of a category word it is. Any inhabitant of the spiritual realm, basically.
So even angels could fit under that umbrella term.
In a sense, yes. The specific words usually translated angel, that's malak in Hebrew, angelos in Greek, they primarily mean messenger. But these messengers are clearly spiritual beings. So while they have a specific function, they still belong to that broader class of spiritual entities, the Elohim. They aren't just, guys with wings and harps. They are part of this diverse spiritual population.
This really reframes those warnings about other gods. It wasn't just about avoiding statues. It was about loyalty in a world full of real competing spiritual powers, only one of whom is the supreme creator.
You got it. It was about exclusive allegiance to Yahweh in the midst of a populated spiritual cosmos.
The Cosmic War, 3 rebellions, and their impact.
Okay, understanding this divine council, this broader category of Elohim, it really sets the stage for seeing the biblical story as this grand cosmic drama. God's original plan, it seems, was for this unified family, his invisible spiritual family, and his earthly human family, all living together in harmony, like in Eden.
Yeah, Eden was meant to be the intersection point, heaven and earth overlapping.
And we see hints of this family idea right back in Genesis 1, don't we? Verse 26, let us make man in our image after our likeness. Who is the us and our there?
The ancient understanding wasn't just the Trinity, though Christians see that foreshadowed. Primarily, it was understood as God addressing his heavenly court, his divine council. Let us, the collective spiritual family, create humanity to be our counterparts on earth.
Wow, so humanity's creation was like a council decision.
A divine family project, yeah.
Yeah.
And Job 38 even mentions this. When God laid the foundation of the earth, the sons of God, another term for council members, the morning stars, they were there shouting for joy. They witnessed our creation.
That's amazing. And being made in God's image, what does that really mean in this context?
It's fundamental. It means we were created to represent God on earth, to be his agents, his stewards. Just like the Elohim and the council represent him and carry out functions in the invisible realm, we were meant to do that in the visible realm. We share certain attributes, reason, creativity, relationship, and critically,
free will,
freedom, the capacity to choose, which is essential for genuine love and relationship, but it opens the door for things to go wrong.
And they did go wrong. Quickly. The first rebellion, we all know the story of the serpent, but like we touched on, maybe we need to ask again, why a serpent? It seems so random.
Right. If you just read it as a talking snake, it feels almost like a fable.
Mm-hmm.
But the ancient Near Eastern context, the world the Israelites lived in, understood serpents very differently. And the text itself gives clues.
You mean it wasn't just an animal?
No, the overwhelming consensus among scholars who study this ancient context, like Heiser, is that the serpent, the Nashash in Hebrew, was understood as a supernatural being, a rebel from God's counsel.
A supernatural rebel? How do we know?
Well, you look at passages like Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. They describe this incredibly powerful, beautiful being. Isaiah calls him Day Star, Son of Dawn. Ezekiel calls him an anointed guardian cherub who was in Eden on God's holy mountain.
A guardian cherub, like the ones on the Ark of the Covenant.
Exactly. Cherubim, that's related to the Mesopotamian caribou, and also seraphim, which has Egyptian links, often associated with fiery serpents. These were terms for high-ranking, powerful guardian beings associated with God's throne and presence. They were types of Elohim.
So the serpent was one of these, a guardian who rebelled.
That's the idea. Ezekiel 28 says this cherub fell because of pride, wanting to usurp God's place. Isaiah 14 echoes that. I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high. I will make myself like the Most High. This was a cosmic coup attempt.
So the temptation in Eden wasn't just a snake chatting with Eve. It was a high-ranking spiritual being, a rebel Elohim, actively working against God's plan for humanity.
Precisely. A powerful guardian entity, choosing rebellion and drawing humanity into it.
And the consequences.
Yeah.
Catastrophic.
Utterly. This rebel is cast down. Death enters the creation. This being becomes, in later tradition, associated with the Lord of the Dead. The whole Edenic vision of harmony between heaven and earth, God and humanity, is shattered.
And incredibly, this was just the first major rebellion. There were more to come.
Oh, yes. 2 more huge ones that shape everything.
All right, if Eden was the first strike, the second one, described in Genesis 6, is arguably even weirder and more challenging for us today.
Yeah, this one really pushes boundaries. It's often ignored or allegorized away because it's so strange.
It talks about the sons of God, seeing the daughters of men, finding them attractive, and taking them as wives. Who are these sons of God?
Based on the usage elsewhere, like Job, Psalm 89, these are members of the divine council, spiritual beings, Elohim.
So angels or divine beings. marrying human women.
That's what the text says. They transgress the boundary between the spiritual and human realms. And this isn't just some obscure Old Testament story. The New Testament writers, Peter and Jude, explicitly refer back to this event.
They confirm it happened.
Yes, 2 Peter 2 and Jude 6 talk about angels who sinned and abandoned their proper domain and are now kept in chains in gloomy darkness or Tartarus awaiting judgment. They clearly understood Genesis 6 as a historical event involving rebellious spiritual beings.
Wow. Okay. And what was the result of these unions?
The offspring were the Nephilim. Genesis 6.4, often translated giants. The word might mean fallen ones. These were hybrid beings, not fully human, not fully spiritual, something unnatural, powerful, and violent.
Giants, like literal giants.
That seems to be the implication. And these Nephilim and their descendants, they pop up later. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Imim. These are the giant clans that terrified the Israelite spies in Numbers 13.
The ones they said made them feel like grasshoppers.
Exactly. And later, Og, king of Bashan, is called the last of the Rephaim. And of course, Goliath and his brothers were descendants of these lines. So this wasn't just a pre-flood anomaly, its effects continued.
Okay, this is already pretty mind-blowing, but you mentioned something earlier that changes things even more about demons.
Right, here's the absolute bombshell from this perspective. Those sons of God, the divine beings who committed this transgression in Genesis 6, Peter and Jude say they are imprisoned in Tartarus, a place of intense confinement. They're not roaming the earth.
So they aren't the demons Jesus was casting out?
No, that's the critical distinction. So the question becomes, if the fallen angels from Genesis 6 are locked up, where did the demons come from?
Yeah, where?
Go brace yourself. The answer, according to extra-biblical Jewish texts that were super influential in Jesus' time, like 1 Enoch, the Book of Giants found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that the demons are the disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim.
The spirits of the dead giants.
Yes. When the flood destroyed their physical bodies, their spirits, which were unnatural hybrid entities, bastard souls is a term sometimes used, they had no place to go. They weren't fully human, so no human afterlife awaited them. They weren't the imprisoned angels. They were left to roam the earth as malevolent, disembodied spirits seeking embodiment. These are the demons.
Whoa, okay. That changes the entire picture of demonology.
Completely. It explains their desire to inhabit bodies, their connection to specific locations often associated with the Nephilim, like tombs or desolate places, their inherent antagonism towards humanity.
And you mentioned ancient myths. How do they fit in?
Well, think about it. Greek mythology has the Titans, powerful beings born from gods and mortals eventually imprisoned. Mesopotamian myths have the Apkallu, semi-divine beings who brought knowledge, sometimes forbidden, to humans. Heiser and others suggest these aren't just random stories. They might be corrupted cultural memories, echoes of these actual biblical events, the Genesis 6 rebellion and the Nephilim.
Like humanity trying to make sense of these profound ancient disruptions.
Exactly. Distorted reflections of a shared traumatic past.
Okay, this has massive implications, especially for understanding some difficult parts of the Old Testament, like the conquest of Canaan, God telling Joshua to wipe out entire populations. It seems so brutal, so unlike the God of love.
It's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks for people reading the Old Testament. But this supernatural worldview provides a crucial context, a supernatural foundation, as Jorge Hill puts it.
How so?
The primary targets of the conquest, especially in places like Hebron and the Hill Country, were specifically the Anakim, the Rephaim, the descendants of the Nephilim. Remember the spies report? Fear of the giants. That's why they balked. That's why God judged that generation.
So it wasn't just random genocide. It was targeted.
It was a targeted removal of these specific hybrid bloodlines that were seen as a corrupting spiritual and physical presence in the land God had promised Abraham. It was the unfinished business from the flood, in a sense, cleaning the land of this specific supernatural corruption.
So Og, king of Bashan, the last of the Rephaim, his defeat was significant.
Hugely significant. Deuteronomy 3 even describes his enormous iron bed as proof of his giant stature. This is about reclaiming the land from these specific enemy lineages. The conquest was fundamentally a spiritual war fought on physical ground.
And David killing Goliath
was the final act in that specific part of the war. Goliath was one of the last prominent descendants of the Anakim Rephaim in the region. David finished the job Joshua started, eliminating this Nephilim remnant. It dramatically reframes these seemingly violent accounts within this larger cosmic conflict against specific non-human evil.
Okay, recap. Rebellion 1 in Eden, the serpent. Rebellion 2 in Genesis 6, sons of God, Nephilim, origin of demons. What was the third major rebellion?
The third one is Babel, Genesis 11. Another story we think we know, but probably miss the cosmic significance of.
Right. Everyone building a tower to reach heaven. God confuses their languages.
But look at why they built it. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. It was defiance.
Making a name for themselves, not glorifying God.
Exactly. And the tower, likely a ziggurat like those in Mesopotamia, wasn't just tall, it was a religious structure, an attempt to access the divine realm on their own terms, probably to commune with other gods, establishing their own connection to the spiritual world, bypassing Yahweh. It was a religious and political rebellion.
Rejecting God's authority and his plan for humanity to fill the earth.
Precisely. And God's response wasn't just confusing languages. This is where Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9 becomes absolutely critical. Moses is singing this song, recounting God's dealings with humanity.
What does it say?
It says, "When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage."
Wait, he fixed the borders according to the number of the sons of God, the council members.
Yes. This is the core argument for the Third Rebellion's consequence. In response to Babel, God essentially says, fine, you don't want me. You want to do things your own way, build your own connections to the divine. Then I will disinherit you nations. He pulls back his direct rule and assigns the governance of these scattered nations to members of his divine council, these other Elohim.
He handed the nations over to lesser spiritual beings.
In judgment, yes. This is why the surrounding nations worshipped other gods, Baal, Marduk, Chemosh, etc. They weren't just making them up. They were under the actual spiritual jurisdiction of these entities God had assigned them to after Babel. Israel was the exception, Yahweh's own portion.
That is huge. It explains the spiritual landscape of the Old Testament world in a completely new way. The constant battle against idolatry, it wasn't just about bad ideas. It was about nations literally under the authority of rival spiritual powers.
Exactly. And these assigned Elohim, these national gods, they became corrupt, they ruled unjustly, they didn't care for the poor and needy, they led humanity further away from the true God.
Which brings us back to Psalm 82 again, doesn't it? God judging these beings.
Precisely. That psalm is God holding court, calling these corrupt celestial governors to account. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? He demands.
And then he delivers that stunning verdict we talked about.
The knockout blow. I said, you are God's Elohim, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince.
This raises an important question. How can immortal beings die like men?
It's a judgment. It doesn't necessarily mean physical death like humans experience, but it means being stripped of their authority, their immortality perhaps, being cast down, losing their status, facing an end. It's a divine decree of mortality imposed on immortal rebels. Profound judgment.
So this whole setup creates what some scholars call cosmic geography.
Yeah, that's a great term for the idea that the spiritual world is mapped onto the physical world. Different territories are under the influence or control of different spiritual powers. The nations surrounding Israel were seen as hostile territory, spiritually speaking.
Like in the book of Daniel.
Perfect example. Daniel 10. The angel messenger is delayed for 21 days because he was fighting the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And he says when he leaves, the prince of Greece will come.
These aren't human princes.
No way. These are the powerful Elohim assigned to Persia and Greece, hostile spiritual rulers influencing world empires, resisting God's purposes. And the angel reveals that Michael, one of the chief princes, is the specific guardian angel, the Elohim assigned to Israel. It's spiritual warfare on a geopolitical scale.
An invisible conflict shaping world history.
Absolutely. And think about that story of Naaman the Syrian in 2 Kings 5. He gets healed by Elisha, a prophet of Yahweh. And what does he ask for?
He wants to take some dirt back home with him.
Yeah. 2 mule loads of earth from Israel. Why? So he can build an altar and worship Yahweh back in Syria on Yahweh's soil. It shows how deeply ingrained this idea was. Gods were territorial. To worship Yahweh properly, Naaman felt he needed to be on consecrated ground, Yahweh's territory, even if it was just a patch of imported dirt.
Wow. That detail suddenly makes so much sense. It reveals this ancient mindset about spiritual territories and allegiances.
The great reversal redemption and our role.
So humanity is scattered, disinherited, largely under the sway of these corrupt Elohim ruling the nations. God's original plan seems completely derailed, but God doesn't give up.
Never. His solutions start small, seemingly insignificant. He calls one man Abraham. Out of Abraham, he creates a people, Israel, his own allotted heritage, a new starting point, a beachhead on earth to relaunch his family project. Israel becomes, in a sense, a new Eden.
But God didn't just work through Israel. He started showing up himself, didn't he? Even in the Old Testament, in visible ways.
He did. We often read over these, but God appeared visibly, sometimes described simply as a man, like the one who wrestled with Jacob at Peniel. Jacob even says, I have seen God face to face.
And the angel of the Lord. That wasn't just a regular angel, was it?
No, the angel of the Lord is consistently portrayed as distinct. He speaks as God, accepts worship, possesses divine authority. Think of the burning bush the angel appears, but it's Yahweh who speaks from the bush. Or Jacob's blessing on Joseph's sons in Genesis 48.
What does he say there?
He says, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. He equates God and the angel who redeemed me.
So the angel is Yahweh, somehow.
That's how many ancient Jews understood it. There was this concept sometimes called the theology of the name, or the two powers in heaven doctrine. It wasn't universally accepted, especially later, but it acknowledged a distinction, an utterly transcendent, invisible Yahweh, and a visible manifestation of Yahweh, often identified as the angel or the word or wisdom, who could interact directly with creation.
It's like God has an emissary who is also himself.
Exactly. It powerfully foreshadows the incarnation.
Which brings us, of course, to Jesus, the ultimate visible manifestation of God.
The ultimate. Jesus isn't just an angel or a son of God in the council sense. John 3:101-6 calls him the Menages Mani, Son, the unique, one-of-a-kind, only begotten Son. He is Yahweh incarnate, fully God, fully man.
And Jesus seemed very aware of this divine identity, even his favorite title for himself, Son of Man. That wasn't just about being human, was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's a classic misunderstanding. Son of Man is a direct reference to Daniel 7. In Daniel's vision, the Son of Man is a divine figure who comes with the clouds of heaven. A symbol of divinity approaches the Ancient of Days, God the Father, and is given everlasting dominion, glory, and kingship over all peoples and nations.
So when Jesus called himself the Son of Man,
he was claiming to be that divine figure from Daniel's vision. That's why Caiaphas, the high priest, freaked out at Jesus' trial. When Jesus says, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven, Caiaphas tears his robes and shouts, blasphemy.
Because he knew Jesus was claiming divinity, claiming to be the figure from Daniel 7?
Precisely. He understood the claim perfectly. And this divine identity reframes Jesus' whole mission, even the temptation in the wilderness.
How so? Satan offers him the kingdoms of the world.
Right. And in this cosmic context, that wasn't an empty promise. Satan, as the lead rebel, had gained influence over the nations disinherited at Babel. Luke 4 says Satan claimed the authority over these kingdoms has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. He was offering Jesus rulership over the nations he controlled, a shortcut to dominion without the cross.
A hostile takeover, essentially.
Yeah, but Jesus rejected it, not just because it was idolatry, but because he had God's plan to win back those nations legitimately through his death and resurrection, defeating the powers that held them captive. He would receive authority from the Father, not from the usurper.
Which leads him to this incredible confrontation point. Caesarea Philippi. Why did he take his disciples there?
Oh, the location is everything. Caesarea Philippi wasn't just some random town. It sat at the base of Mount Hermon. In the Old Testament, that area was called Bashan territory of Og, the giant king. It was infamous as a center for pagan worship, particularly of Baal.
Okay, a pagan stronghold.
More than that, it housed a massive cave known as the Gates of Hades, or the Cave of Pan, a place associated with the underworld and demonic activity. And crucially, Jewish tradition, particularly 1 Enoch, identified Mount Hermon as the very spot where the rebellious sons of God from Genesis 6 descended to earth.
So this place was like ground zero for cosmic evil.
Exactly. The symbolic heartland of the enemy's territory.
Yeah.
And it's there, standing before the literal gates of Hades, that Jesus asks, who do people say that I am? Peter makes his great confession. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus responds with that monumental declaration in Matthew 16:18.
You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it.
Now, get this. We usually read that defensively, like the church will just barely survive attacks from hell. But given the location, the context, it's totally offensive.
Offensive? How?
Jesus is saying, on this confession, I will build my assembly, my ecclesia, my invasion force, and we are going to storm the gates of Hades, the enemy's stronghold, and they will not withstand us. The gates won't prevail because the church is kicking them down.
Whoa, the church is on the attack.
Yes, it completely flips the script. The church's mission isn't passive survival. It's active, confident spiritual invasion and conquest, taking back enemy territory.
That changes everything. And this offensive began as an earnest at Pentecost, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Pentecost, Acts 2. We know the story. The Holy Spirit comes, tongues of fire, speaking in other languages.
But there's more going on cosmically.
Way more. Think about Babel. God confused languages, scattered the nations, disinherited them, assigned them to other Elohim. Now at Pentecost, the Holy Spirit reverses the language curse. Jews from all those scattered nations hear the gospel in their own languages.
It's the undoing of Babel's linguistic judgment.
Precisely. God is signaling that disinheritance is over. I'm reclaiming the nations. The language barrier erected at Babel is being overcome by the Spirit. This is why, right after his resurrection, Jesus declares, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me," and then commissions his followers. "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations."
Reclaiming the nations that were handed over.
Yes. He won back the authority Satan offered him illegitimately. Now he sends out his church, empowered by the Spirit, to announce his reign and bring those nations back into his family.
And Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, he really got this, didn't he?
Oh, Paul totally understood cosmic geography. His missionary journeys weren't just random travel. He saw himself as invading enemy territory, planting beachheads of the kingdom in nations ruled by hostile powers. His ambition to go to Spain wasn't just wanderlust.
Why Spain?
Spain, or Tarshish, was considered the ends of the earth, according to the Genesis 10 table of nations, the list of peoples scattered from Babel. Paul wanted to take the gospel to the very limits of the known disinherited world. He was on a mission of cosmic reconquest.
And our mission today is a continuation of that.
Exactly. Not with swords, but with the gospel. We're still pushing back the darkness, reclaiming ground for the king.
This is incredibly powerful. So if this cosmic war is ongoing and the church is God's offensive force, where does that leave us as individual believers? Where is God's presence concentrated now?
Well, God is omnipresent, of course. But he specifically marks his presence, his dwelling place, in every single believer through the Holy Spirit.
So we are the temple now.
Yes. Each believer is essentially walking, talking sacred space, a mobile tabernacle, a micro-Eden where God dwells. And when believers gather, that space becomes collectively sacred. That's the church, the temple of God Paul talks about. Think about the implications. Where you walk, where you plant your feet, the hostile Elohim, the powers of darkness, should recognize that the territory is contested, because the King himself, the God of gods, walks with you and dwells in you.
We carry his presence into enemy territory just by living our lives.
You got it. Your very existence as a Spirit-filled believer is an act of spiritual warfare, a declaration that this territory belongs to Jesus.
Okay, that sheds new light on another passage that always felt a bit obscure. 1 Peter 3, it talks about baptism saving us and then about Christ preaching to spirits in prison. What's that about?
Right, it seems to come out of nowhere unless you understand the background Peter and his readers shared. Like Paul, Peter often alluded to texts like 1 Enoch, which were widely read and respected then, even if not in our canon today.
So 1 Enoch helps explain this.
It provides the context. 1 Enoch describes Enoch preaching judgment to the fallen watchers, the sons of God from Genesis 6, before they were imprisoned. Peter draws a parallel. Jesus, after his resurrection but before his ascension, descended spiritually speaking to these same imprisoned spirits in Tartarus.
Why?
Not to offer them salvation, but to proclaim his victory, to announce to the architects of the second rebellion that their defeat was sealed, that he had conquered sin, death, and the powers of hell. It fulfilled the judgment pronounced back in Psalm 82.
Okay, so that's the preaching part. How does baptism connect?
Peter says baptism isn't just washing dirt off the body, but an appeal to God for a good conscience, or, as some translate it, a pledge or oath. In this cosmic war context, baptism is your public declaration of allegiance.
Like enlisting.
Exactly. It's your swearing-in ceremony. You're publicly changing signs. You're renouncing allegiance to the kingdom of darkness and pledging loyalty to King Jesus. You're putting on his uniform in the midst of the battlefield. You're telling all the spiritual powers, I belong to Jesus now. His victory is mine.
Which might explain why sometimes things seem to get harder after someone becomes a Christian or gets baptized.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've just publicly declared war on the enemy. You've switched teams. Of course, the opposition is going to notice and likely intensify. You're now an active combatant for the winning side.
So we're sacred space. We're enlisted soldiers declaring our allegiance. What's the ultimate goal? What's our cosmic destiny in all this? Is it just about going to heaven when we die?
It's so much bigger than just escaping Earth. Our destiny is to be fully restored into God's family, to become participants in the divine nature, as 2 Peter puts it. We're destined to receive glorified resurrection bodies like Jesus' own body.
To be like him.
Yes. Hebrews 2 says Jesus isn't ashamed to call us brothers. He presents us before the Father and the council, saying, "Here am I, and the children God has given me." Romans 8 says we are predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that Jesus might be the firstborn among many brothers. We become part of the divine family in a way Adam forfeited.
That's beautiful. But what about ruling? You mentioned replacing the rebels.
This is the most mind-blowing part of our destiny. The kingdom is already, but not yet. Darkness still holds sway in many areas. But the ultimate plan. The Bible explicitly states that redeemed humanity will replace the rebellious sons of God in the administration of the cosmos. We will inherit their position.
We will rule.
Yes. Think about 1 Corinthians 6.3. Paul asks, almost casually, "Do you not know that we are to judge angels?" He assumes they knew this. We will participate in the judgment and administration, even over spiritual beings.
Judging angels.
And Revelation 2, Jesus promises the one who conquers. I will give authority over the nations, and I will give him the morning star. The morning star is a title Jesus himself uses in Revelation 22. It symbolizes his royal authority. He's saying we will share his reign over the nations, taking over from the corrupt Elohim who currently rule them.
We replace the fallen council members.
That's the destiny. We become co-heirs with Christ, sharing his inheritance, which includes ruling the recreated heaven and earth. The final picture in Revelation 3.21 is breathtaking. The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne.
God and humanity reunited, co-ruling, Eden restored and magnified.
Exactly. It's the ultimate fulfillment of God's original purpose. It's an absolutely incredible, empowering vision. It gives profound meaning to our struggles, our mission, our very existence. This is why you're here. This is your cosmic destiny. Outro.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot. A truly incredible deep dive into a side of the Bible many of us, I think, have never really seen before. My head is spinning a little, but in a good way. It just adds so many layers of depth, doesn't it? Takes it beyond just moral lessons or historical accounts into this epic spiritual saga. I really appreciate you walking us through that.
It's fascinating stuff. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right. So what does this all mean? As we wrap up, what's the big takeaway for everyone listening? It means we're not just spectators. We're participants in this huge spiritual conflict.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the main thing is to live with boldness based on this reality. Remember Jesus' promise about the gates of Hades? They won't prevail, not because the church is hiding behind strong walls, but because the church is on the offensive.
We're the ones attacking the gates.
We are. Our mission, empowered by the Spirit, is to actively invade the darkness, to push back against the strongholds of the enemy in this world, armed with the truth and love of Jesus. You, personally, are sacred space. You carry the presence of the King. Live like it. Don't shrink back.
Let the powers of darkness tremble.
Let them tremble. Because the God who dwells in you is infinitely greater than the powers who rule this present darkness.
That's an incredible encouragement. Okay, one final thought to leave you all with, something to chew on. If we, as believers, are truly sacred space, temples where God himself dwells, and if our ultimate destiny is not just heaven, but to literally judge angels and rule with Christ, replacing the very powers that currently influence the nations, how should that radically change the way we live our lives today? Right now, in this already but not yet phase, what kind of responsibility does that place on us? How does it redefine who we are and what we're doing here, day in and day out, in this grand cosmic story? Something to think about.